I fear not the dark itself, but what may lurk within it. Welcome to Lurk, bringing you creepy, strange, and bone-chilling stories, with your host, Jamie Jackson.
Hey Lurkers, this is Jamie. Welcome to episode 30. Today we have a special guest with us. My son Ethan has asked to guest co-host for an episode of his choosing. So today's topic was picked by Ethan. You want to say hello and tell him what we're talking about?
Hello. We're talking about the murder at room 1046.
Thank you for that detailed description. Before we get started, I do want to mention we are recording downstairs in the main area of our house, so there might be dog noises, there might be cat noises. I will do my best to edit those out. So, as Ethan said, he refers to it as room 1046. I refer to it as room 1046. It's quicker.
But incorrect.
Whatever. Basically, it's the story of an unsolved murder that happened in 1935 in Kansas City. Was that Missouri? Was that yes? It happened in Kansas City, Missouri, not Kansas. In case you're wondering,
I know
Kansas City's in both states. So I guess we will get ready to jump in here. I don't know how much Ethan's going to talk. He kind of looks like a deer in headlights. January 2nd, 1935, there is a gentleman by the name, well, he gives his name as Roland T. Owen.
Yeah.
He walks into the Hotel President in Kansas City, Missouri, and asks for an interior room several floors up. He gave a Los Angeles address. The staff remembered him as being well-dressed and wearing a dark overcoat. He had no bags with him, and he paid for one night. Staff noted that in addition to the visible scar on his temple, he also had a cauliflower ear. You know what cauliflower ear is?
Yeah, it's where you get punched in the ear a lot, and the blood goes into the ear and puffs up.
So yeah, cauliflower ear, it's also known as wrestler's ear, or perichondrial hematoma. It's a deformity of the ear caused by blunt trauma. Or, as Ethan said, getting punched in the ear a whole bunch of times.
Mm-hmm. It happens in, boxing.
Yeah, I dated somebody that had cauliflower ear. They were a wrestler.
Thanks for sharing.
You're welcome. Because of the cauliflower ear, they concluded he was probably a boxer or a professional wrestler. And they guessed his age was somewhere around his early 20s. Randolph, who was one of the bellhops at the hotel, accompanied Roland Owen up in the elevator to the 10th floor. On the way, Owen told Randolph that he had spent the previous night at the nearby Muehlebach Hotel, but found the $5 nightly rate too high. So that rate, based on inflation, would be $100 today, just so you know. $5, it seems like real $5 for a hotel is not a big deal. So it would be about $100 today. Still, that's not really a big deal.
No, not anymore.
So the bellhop opened room 1046, which, per the guest request, was on the inside overlooking the hotel's courtyard rather than the street outside. The bellhop watched as Roland Owen took a hairbrush, comb, and toothpaste from his overcoat pocket, which was the extent of his unpacking. Kind of sounds like you. Really?
I mean, I don't pack a lot of stuff. There's no point. You just take what you need.
After Roland Owen placed those items above the sink, he and Randolph, the bellhop, left the room, and the bellboy, or the bellhop, returned to lock the room and gave Owen the key. So this was back when they had no card entry keys. Like now you get the card, you slide it in there.
Swipe it in.
Well, back then it was an actual key. After returning to the lobby, the bellhop saw Owen leave the hotel. A short time afterward, Mary Soptic was one of the hotel maids. She returns from her day off to work the afternoon shift. She went into room 1046 and was surprised to find Roland Owen there, since the previous night there was a woman who had been staying in the room. She apologized, but he told her she could go ahead and clean the room. Basically, it sounds like the hotel just put somebody in a room that hadn't been cleaned first. Like, if the maid's just showing up to clean the room and she is expecting there to be a woman and there's somebody different in there, then that would lead me to believe they didn't clean the room, which is really gross.
I mean, it's a different time era, so probably different standards.
Still gross. You're probably right, but it's still gross. So when she cleaned the room, she noticed that the shades were drawn and he left only one dim lamp on. This was the case on the other occasions that she would encounter him in the room during his stay. She said, quote, he was either worried about something or afraid. After she had been cleaning for a few minutes, Mr. Owen put on his overcoat, brushed his hair, and left, but asked her to leave the room unlocked, as he was expecting some friends in a few minutes. Soptic did as he asked. At 4 p.m., she returned to the room with fresh towels. The room was dark, and Roland was lying on the bed, fully clothed. The maid was able to see a note on the bedside table in the light coming in from the hallway that said, Don, I will be back in 15 minutes. Wait. The next morning, January 3rd, the maid returns to room 1046 around 10:30 a.m. The door was locked and she assumed he was out since it could only be locked from the outside. But he was in the room, sitting in the room where he had been the previous afternoon. The phone rang while she was there and he answered. Roland Owen's end of the conversation was,
No, Dawn, I don't want to eat. I am not hungry. I just had breakfast. No, I am not hungry.
So while he was still holding the phone, Roland asked the maid about her job. He wanted to know if she was responsible for the entire floor and if the president was residential, meaning could people rent rooms to live. He repeated his complaint about the Mullabach's high prices. She then finished cleaning and left. It was later that she realized that if the door was locked from the outside, that meant someone had to have locked Owen in his room. At 4 p.m. on January 3rd, the maid returns to the room with fresh towels. Inside, she could hear two people talking, two men, so she knocked. One voice she described as loud and deep, and not belonging to Roland Owen, asked who it was. She responded that she had brought fresh towels, and the man answered that they didn't need any. She knew this wasn't true, since she herself had removed the towels from the room just that morning. 2 hours later, around 6 p.m., a woman by the name of Jean Owen of Lee's Summit near Kansas City checked into the president after a shopping trip in the city for a few hours. She was feeling sick and decided not to drive back home that night. She was given room 1048. Her boyfriend, who worked at a flower shop in the city, came to visit her in her room at 9:20 p.m. and stayed for 2 hours. Yeah, I bet she was sick. I bet that's why she checked into the hotel. He's nodding his head. Later that night, Jean heard men and women talking loudly and profanely all over the floor. She wasn't the only person to note unusual late-night activity on the 10th floor. Elevator operator Charles Blocker, who began his shift at midnight, reported that he was fairly busy until about 1:30 a.m. After that, most of the hotel was quiet except for a loud party in room 1055. Sounds like the 10th floor was where it was happening. Charles Blocker remembered one visitor in particular, a woman he had seen at the hotel visiting male guests in their rooms on other occasions, and who he believed was a prostitute. This was the same opinion other hotel staff had of the woman. She apparently came there a lot, visiting men for money. But you don't know anything about that, because you're a child.
Sure.
The woman came in first sometime during Blocker's first 3 hours, and he took her up to the 10th floor, where she asked about room 1026. 5 minutes later, the elevator was summoned to the 10th floor again, and it turned out to be the same woman who expressed puzzlement that her client was not in room 1046. Since he had called her, and on previous visits with him, he had always been present. It's very confusing. She wondered if in fact he was in room 1024, which she could see through the room's transom window that the light was on. A transom window, by the way, is a window that is above a door, and it was used back in the day before there was air conditioning. It could be open to allow for airflow, so it's like a rectangular window above a door. We have it above our front door, because our house is old. So you would be able to see the light in the room. Half an hour later, Blocker got another signal to take the elevator back to the 10th floor, and the same woman was waiting again. This time he took her down to the lobby. An hour later, he took her and a different man to the 9th floor. At 4:15 a.m., a call from the 9th floor turned out to be the woman, and he took her down to the lobby and she left the hotel for the night. Another call to the 9th floor 15 minutes later turned out to be the man who had come up with the questionable woman, and he told Blocker he could not sleep and was going out for a walk. That's crazy. So basically, the prostitute goes to the 10th floor, thinks it's one room, mentions a totally different room, then she thinks it's in another room because the light is on, doesn't get in the elevator, but I guess goes to that other room, eventually calls him back up, she goes down to the lobby, then he takes her and a different man up to the 9th floor, then she leaves, then the man leaves because he says he's going for a walk. That's kind of weird. I'd imagine they must have had steps in that hotel too.
Yeah, it seems like almost like a distraction.
A distraction, or they were going to the 9th floor instead of the 10th floor on purpose.
Yeah.
To throw them off the trail. Anyway, obviously, we said this was a murder mystery, so obviously there's going to be a murder on the 10th floor.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert, somebody's going to die. January 4th, 7 a.m., a new switchboard operator, Della Ferguson, starts her shift. She was preparing to make a requested wake-up call to room 1046, which is Roland Owen's room, when she noticed the light was on, indicating the phone was off the hook. Do you know what that means?
Means that the telephone was in the thing, so it was still, like, buzzing. Because you pick it off the receiver to make a call. I'm
asking. I'm not trying to be a smart ass. A lot of people did not grow up with regular phones.
I mean, I didn't either, but I still know what it means.
I know, but some other people may not. So basically, old phones, you had a receiver. I'm sure everybody has seen them. You picked it up. If you didn't want to take phone calls, you would take the receiver off of the cradle. They called it the cradle, and you would set it down. So anybody who tried to call you would get a busy signal. Basically, she could tell the phone was off the hook, but it wasn't in use. She had a way of seeing that. So he wasn't on a phone call. It just was not hung up properly. Which sometimes you can hang it up and it not be resting right. And you think it's hung up, but it's not. Randolph Probst was the name of the bellhop. So that same bellhop that had taken Roland T. Owen, who he was the guy in the room in 1046, who they're trying to call and can't because the phone's off the hook. The bellhop is sent to go up to his room to knock on the door because he wanted a wake-up call, and they can't call him because the phone's not hung up. So when the bellhop arrives at the room, there was a do not disturb sign hanging from the doorknob. He knocked loudly several times anyway because he wanted a wake-up call, and a voice inside tells the bellhop to enter, but the door was locked and he couldn't. He knocked again, and the voice told him to turn on the lights, but he still couldn't get in the room. Finally, Probst just shouted through the door to hang up the phone, and he left and returned to the lobby. The bellhop tells the operator that the guest in room 1046 was probably drunk, and she should wait another hour. But at 8:30 a.m., the phone was still off the hook, so she sends another bellboy, Harold Pike, up to the 10th floor. The do not disturb sign is still on the door, and it's still locked, but Pike had the key with him, and he let himself in the room. Inside, he found the man lying on the bed, naked, apparently drunk. The light spilling in from the hallway showed some dark spots on the bedding. Hello, dark spots on the bedding. I wonder what that could be.
Some alcohol that he was drinking from earlier.
Yeah, but it wouldn't show up.
Which made him drunk.
I don't know, but that wouldn't show up as a dark spot.
Red wine?
I'll give you that. Most men don't drink red wine to get drunk, but...
Now you're being sexist.
Okay, it's red wine then. It could be. It's not, but it could be.
No, but it could be.
It could be.
This isn't a murder at all.
Oh, no. He sees in the light the dark stains on the bedding, but Pike didn't turn on the light in the room. He just goes over to the telephone stand where he found the phone lying on the floor, and he returned it to the stand and replaced the handset. Hanging it up, basically. A little after 10:30 a.m., 2 hours later, another operator reports that the phone in 1046 was once again off the hook.
Almost like he was trying to send a message.
You think? You think he was, trying to call?
Yeah, but the guy must not have common sense or something because he kind of missed the The blood.
Seriously. So Probst, who was the original bellboy, he's not a boy, he's a man. They're not. Bellhop. We'll go with bellhop. So he was the one who went up the first time. He sent up to the room to see what was going on. The do not disturb sign is still on the doorknob. This time, he had a key with him, and after knocking and not getting a response, he opens the door and he finds the man on his knees and elbows 2 feet away, and his head is bloodied. Probst turned on the light, put the phone back on the hook, and then noticed blood on the walls of both the main room and the bathroom, as well as the bed itself.
Sounds like a normal bloody nose.
It was apparently a pretty brutal, bloody scene.
He must have had a real rager that night.
Yeah, I'd tell you. So Probst goes down to the lobby immediately for help. He and his assistant manager returned to the room, but they were only able to open the door about 6 inches because the man had since fallen on the floor in front of the door. Eventually, the man got up, and when the 2 hotel employees were able to enter the room, the man went and sat on the edge of the bathtub. The assistant manager called the police, and they arrived and were joined by Dr. Harold Flanders of the Kansas City General Hospital. The man had been bound with cord around his neck, wrists, and ankles. His neck had additional bruising, suggesting someone had attempted to strangle him. He had been stabbed more than once in the chest, above the heart, and one of these wounds had punctured a lung. Blows to his head had caused skull fractures on the right side. In addition to the blood Probst, the bellhop, had seen, there was also spatter on the ceiling. That's crazy.
A lot of force under those knife stabs. They probably were fighting it out.
Yeah, I mean,
that's probably the only way the guy lived for a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, not just the stabs, but maybe even from punching.
Yeah.
Punching him in the head, maybe.
And someone was trying to strangle him too, so the only way he got out of that was fighting his way out, which somehow he did.
Yeah, I don't know how he managed that. So Dr. Flanders cut the cords from his wrists and everything and asked him who had done this to him. His answer was...
nobody.
He was then asked what caused the injuries, and he said he had fallen and hit his head on the tub.
Yeah, sounds about right. That's how...
I guess he was carrying a knife.
Yeah, and then that's how he was jumping up. He was doing some stuff to get the blood on the ceiling.
I guess.
He kept putting the phone off the receiver.
I mean, why wouldn't you just tell him who did it?
Maybe they are blackmailing him, or they have his family or something.
I don't know. The doctor asked if he had been trying to kill himself. He answered no, and that's when he lost consciousness and was taken to the hospital. Why in the world would somebody ask if they were trying to kill themselves? They have 2 stab wounds, they've been beaten, strangled, and they're tied up. I don't even know why they would ask that. Like, that's not going to be my next conclusion.
No. It might have just been incompetence.
I don't know.
Or the doctor was just...
I don't know. I mean, anyway. He is completely comatose by the time he gets to the hospital, and he dies shortly after midnight. The investigation began immediately by the Kansas City Police Department. First, they interviewed Jean Owen because of the identical last name and her room being adjacent to the dead man's room. She's no relation to him. I don't know if I said that earlier, but she's not related to him. Just coincidence. And you'll find out why. Shortly. I don't want to give it away yet, but... She told them everything she had heard the night before, and once her boyfriend came in and corroborated her story, she was released and she returned home. Doctors performed an autopsy and determined that Roland Owen died from his wounds. Shocker. Of course he died from his wounds. That's what it said. Dr. Flanders examined not just the body, but also the bloodstains in the room. He estimated the wounds had been inflicted between 4 and 5 a.m. that day, which was consistent with what Harold Pike had seen before Probst's first visit. So, I guess during the whole going up and checking or whatever.
Yeah. Maybe the phone came off of the receiver because the 2 men were in a fight in the hotel. And it got knocked over the first time.
I never thought about that.
And then the second time, he probably took it off because he knew that they reacted to it being off the receiver.
Yeah, the police kind of felt that he was attempting to call for help. And that's why the phone was off the receiver, that he wasn't able to do anything.
The only problem with that is, though, he wouldn't say who did it. He didn't say anything like who hurt him or anything. So what's the point of doing that if you're not going to help him in any way?
True. I don't know. So detectives searched the room and they took note of what they did not find as much as what they did find. There were no clothes in the closets or drawers, and the only evidence of anything other than what he had been wearing was the tag of a necktie that indicated it had been made by a company in New Jersey. Also missing from the room was the soap, shampoo, and towels the hotel provides in every room. That I find kind of interesting because taking that stuff is more of a woman thing than a guy thing.
Unless they don't have fingerprints back then.
Yeah, they did.
They did?
Mm-hmm.
Well, they probably didn't wear gloves or anything, but I don't know.
I mean,
I was thinking, like, if they had put their fingers on the stuff and then they took it that way.
I don't know. I just know when I stay in a hotel, I check to see what kind of stuff they leave. And when I leave the hotel, I always take the stuff with me. Not the towels, because you get charged for those now. But the sample shampoos, whereas most guys I know...
I just don't care.
Exactly. You're a guy. You don't care. So taking that stuff seems more of a woman doing that than a man. Yeah. There were no knives found in the room, which ruled out the possibility of suicide as a cause. And of course, being tied up was a clue, which was my point. One of the room's 2 glasses was found in the sink, missing a piece. I guess that means it was broken. It didn't say broken, but it said missing a piece. The other was up on a shelf. A hairpin, safety pin, unsmoked cigarette, and a full bottle of sulfuric acid were also found that all might have been evidence. This was also diluted sulfuric acid, which is important to note because there is a difference. Sulfuric acid is capable of causing severe burns, especially when it's higher concentrations. When it's dilute grade, it's not as caustic on your skin, but it is known to char paper if left in contact for significant time. So I couldn't find anything for what diluted sulfuric acid would be needed for by somebody. Are you in chemistry?
Yeah. Unless if he was getting rid of something.
Yeah, it chars paper, but...
It would be easier to burn something because you have cigarettes.
Yeah.
So you have to light the cigarettes somehow, so...
Yeah, so I don't know. I couldn't find anything reason for it because at first I'm thinking maybe he's burning his prints off his fingers or something, but it was diluted. It wouldn't do that.
No, and also it would be easier to do it with a flame because you don't have to let it sit there.
Yeah, but that's painful. I guess sulfuric acid would be painful.
Yeah, well, you have to leave it on your finger and would be eating away on your skin.
Okay, yeah, good point. There were 4 fingerprints that were found. They were small, and the police thought that they were possibly from a woman. And they were found on the room's phone, and they were not found to be Roland Owens or any of the hotel employees known to have entered the room.
Did they find any fingerprints from Roland Owens or no?
I didn't see that anywhere. They just, I'm sure they found his fingerprints, but I guess there's the point more in the report was that
there was only 4.
These were different.
Yeah. And
couldn't be matched to any known person to have been in the room, and they were small and looked like a woman.
Yeah, but how would you only touch something 4 times? And if you're in a room...
If she picked up the phone and took it off the hook.
Yeah, but you would also have to open up the door. You would also have to, if you were trying to kill him, you would have to touch him. You would also have to touch the stuff that you got the rope from.
Except it's January, and when you're leaving the room... Possible that they had gloves on, not like rubber gloves, but
like leather
winter gloves.
Yeah.
Or a lady's dress gloves.
Yeah.
Because women wore that sort of thing back then. Police decided to use the press to try to help with the case. It soon became apparent that Roland T. Owen was an alias. Kansas City police contacted Los Angeles police to try and contact the next of kin, since that's where Mr. Owen claimed to have been from, but Los Angeles Police Department said they could find no record of anyone under that name living in the city at the time. The dead man's fingerprints were sent to what was at the time called the Justice Department's Bureau of Investigation, which is what later becomes the FBI, to try and find a possible match. On January 6th, the Sunday papers reported that the man in room 1046 had died under an assumed name, and tips began pouring in. People went to the funeral home where he had been laid out. One man thought he had had an encounter with the dead man, On the night of January 3rd, Robert Lane, a city worker, was driving on 13th Street around 11 p.m. when he saw a man dressed only in an undershirt, pants, and shoes run into his path and flag him down. When Lane stopped, the man apologized, saying he had mistaken Lane's car for a taxi. The man then asked Lane if he could take him somewhere where he might be able to catch a taxi, and Lane agreed. "You look as if you've been in it bad," Lane observed. The man swore he would kill someone else tomorrow, presumably in retaliation for whatever had been done to him. In the mirror, Lane saw a deep scratch on the man's arm. He also noticed that he was cupping his arm, possibly to catch blood from a more severe wound. At the nearby intersection where taxi drivers often waited for fares during overnight hours, Lane stopped and let the man out. The man thanked him, got out, and honked the horn of a taxi parked nearby, drawing the driver out of a nearby restaurant where he had been eating. Lane drove away. After hearing of the mysterious man's death, he went to view the body and saw that the body had the same scratch on the arm as the man he picked up, and he contacted police. After interviewing Lane, the police were not as convinced as Lane that it was the same man, since none of the hotel staff had reported seeing the man leave or return during the night of January 3rd to 4th. Just because you don't see him leave doesn't mean he didn't leave.
Yeah. And they have a bunch of people there. That it's not like he was their only person there. They had other people there. They had a party there.
Yeah, there was like all kinds of stuff going on.
Yeah,
so
I mean, he could have...
I imagine they have to have a back door, too. I mean, if he didn't want to be seen.
Other exits to go out.
Right. Police were able to confirm one sighting of Roland Owen outside the hotel, where he had been seen with two women at several liquor places on 12th Street. I don't know if that means bars or liquor store. It's just a place where you get liquor of some sort.
Yeah.
Wire services began picking up the story, and it ran in newspapers and radio around the country with requests to send photos to Kansas City. More leads came in, and Kansas City Police Department had to spend considerable time on the case, corresponding with police all over the United States via mail and telegram to follow up leads. They were able to eliminate many of them. There was a promising break when a bloodied towel was found at the hotel president, but it turned out the towel had been used to clean up the crime scene after the police had left. This is 1935, so crime scene stuff is not up to the same standards
code
as it is today. Officers remembered the bellhop Probst mentioned that Roland Owen had talked about checking into the Muhlenbach Hotel before he had checked into the president. So they checked with the staff there. No Roland T. Owen had checked in. But they did recall that a man fitting the description had checked in under the name Eugene K. Scott, who also gave a Los Angeles address, and who also requested a room on the interior of the building. Kansas City Police Department contacted Los Angeles Police Department again, but again, after investigating, there was no one by that name living in the city. The mystery seemed solved when a man identified the body as his cousin, but when the man's sister came to view the body, she confirmed that the cousin had died about 5 years earlier, and that though there was a strong resemblance to the unknown dead man, it wasn't her cousin. Like, if you know your cousin has been dead for some time, why would you think it was your cousin?
Grief. If you're grieving a lot, maybe.
I guess.
You could possibly, hope that it is your cousin. Maybe not think, just hope.
Yeah. I thought you were going to say, zombies. You're giving me, intelligent answers. I thought you were going to be like, man, he probably came back to life. He's a zombie eating brains. But no, you're being the mature one.
Yeah, for once.
There was a wrestling promoter from Arkansas that thought the man might be someone who identified himself as Cecil Warner, who had approached him around the beginning of December 1934 about some wrestling matches. He had referred this man to another promoter in Nebraska, but that promoter did not recognize Roland Owen. 2 new homicides in the city took the attention away from the case. Leads were still followed, but not as vigorously, and none resulted in any useful information. On March 3rd, the case came back into the spotlight when it was announced that the body would be buried in Potter's Field. You know what Potter's Field is?
Isn't that where it gets an unmarked grave?
It's
just
for people who don't have any money or who
this guy could have had money. They just don't know his name.
Yeah, I was going to say unidentified people or like Jane Does or John Does. The same day that was announced in the media, the funeral home gets a phone call from a man who asked that the funeral be delayed so they could send money for a grave and service at Memorial Park Cemetery in Kansas City, Kansas, so the man could be buried near his sister. The funeral director told the man that he would have to tell the police about the call, and the man said he knew and that didn't bother him. When the funeral director asked why Roland Owen had been killed, the man claimed that Owen had had an affair with one woman while he was engaged to marry another. The man and the two women had arranged the encounter with him at the president in order to get revenge. Cheaters usually get what's coming to them, he said, and then hung up. So basically they're saying, this guy says that Owen, whatever his name is, we're still calling him that right now until we see if he has another name. So Owen, he has another name. We know what it is.
I'm not going to tell you what his other name is, but I think he's going to get another name.
So basically, he's engaged to one woman, but he cheats on her with another woman. So these two women and some mysterious guy set up the encounter with him in order to get revenge. Apparently, revenge means they need to kill him, and that's the whole reason why he's dead. Seems a little extreme to me.
Yeah, but the only problem is he was seen with two girls at the liquor stores. And if it was those two girls, it wouldn't make sense because he would be having an affair with one and be engaged to the other. That wouldn't make sense.
No, because you would want to
make them far apart from each other so they don't know each other.
Exactly.
So why would you keep them right together?
Exactly. That whole scenario doesn't really make any sense. Not that there couldn't be two women involved. Obviously, there's a woman involved.
Yeah.
Because of the fingerprints.
And it just depends on what the role was and why.
Yeah.
There was a woman involved.
So, they did postpone the funeral per the caller's request, and on March 23rd, the funeral home received an envelope where the address had been carefully lettered. They said they had actually used a ruler to write the address so that it was straight, which is silly.
Unless that they don't want them to check possible signatures or anything, like writing.
Handwriting, yeah.
Like writing styles. That way it seems anonymous, and that way they don't...
Yeah. So inside, the envelope was $25 wrapped in newspaper, and that was enough to cover the expenses. $25 would be about $500 today, which seems cheap for a funeral, but I guess...
Back then, it was different standards.
Well, $25 is super cheap, but they're saying $25 is equal to $500, and that was still enough to cover it. Today's funerals would not cost $500. Yeah, but did he get like a gravestone
and all of that, or did he just get to go to a different spot in like a small
I don't know, I didn't look it up. Still,
if you have like a giant headstone.
Coffins are like $1,000, at least. 2 additional envelopes with $5 each were sent to a local florist for an arrangement of 13 American Beauty roses, specifically. And it included, with the payment, a card that had disguised handwriting, so you're probably right in them trying to disguise their handwriting on the envelope. And the card read, "Love Forever, Louise." The funeral was held shortly after, and other than the officiating minister, the only attendees were police detectives, some who served as pallbearers, and there were other detectives posing as grave diggers that were staking out the cemetery for several days after the funeral, but no one came to visit the grave. Louise did not show up.
Is that a girl's name?
Yes. That's why we have a chicken named Louise.
I thought it was a boy's name at first, like Louis or something.
It's like a girl version of Louis, I guess. Louise. Days after the funeral, a woman called the Kansas City Journal-Post newsroom to tell them that their earlier story about the man being buried in a pauper's grave was wrong. When asked to identify herself, she said, "Never mind, I know what I'm talking about." Pressed further, she said, "He got into a jam," and hung up. So basically, the funeral was postponed. I guess the newspapers didn't follow that whole story after that. And she was calling the newspapers to say, hey, he did not get buried in Potter's Field. He actually had a regular burial to tip them off. Her response to their questions that he got in a jam. Photos of the dead man kept circulating in the hopes of identifying him. Finally, a friend of a woman named Ruby Ogletree in Birmingham, Alabama, showed her an issue of the American Weekly, which was a Sunday newspaper supplement. The unidentified man looked a great deal like Ruby's son, Artemis, who had not been seen by the family since he left home in 1934 to hitchhike to California, though he did keep up regular correspondence, so he did mail them letters. And let me give you a little PSA right now. Don't hitchhike.
Unless it's the last option.
Don't hitchhike.
Unless if it's the last option.
Don't hitchhike. You don't hitchhike. Last option or not, you don't hitchhike. You have a cell phone you can call.
I mean, he didn't have a cell phone back then.
I'm talking about today. Don't hitchhike. I'm telling people...
If you time travel to back then, you won't have a cell phone.
Okay, but what I'm saying is, today, somebody may hear, oh yeah, that sounds cool. This guy hitchhiked in California. That sounds like something I should do. Yeah, no. It's not cool to do that today.
How else are you supposed to get YouTube famous?
You won't, because you'll be dead.
Not
The
necessarily.
serial killer will pick you up and you will die.
Unless if you make the joke in every single car, what's the odds of having 2 serial killers in each car?
Oh, you're hilarious. Ruby contacts Kansas City Police Department and provides information, including a description of the scar on her son's forehead that had been the result of a hot grease spill. The man was finally identified as Artemis Ogletree. But there were still more questions. Ruby had received letters from her son after he was dead. The first one came in early 1935 and was postmarked in Chicago. She was suspicious because it was typewritten, and as far as she knew, her son didn't really know how to type. It was also written in a style not typical of his usual letters home. Then in May of 1935, another letter allegedly from Artemis said he was going to Europe. It was followed by a special delivery letter saying that his ship was sailing that day. Both of these were sent from New York.
Again, they were typed.
I don't know if those were typed. The first one was typed.
Again, which implies that they were disguising their handwriting.
Yes, exactly.
Also, how did he get all that money to go to Europe in the first place? He was hitchhiking to California, so...
Yeah.
It shows that he doesn't have a lot of money.
Yeah, exactly.
And he was complaining about the hotel prices earlier.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. So then in August 1935, Ruby receives a phone call from Memphis, Tennessee, from a man who claimed Artemis saved his life in a fight and that Artemis himself couldn't call because he was now living in Cairo, Egypt, that he was married to a wealthy woman, and that he couldn't write because he lost both of his thumbs in the fight where he had saved the caller.
Sounds very believable.
Yes. It's like... He moved all the way to Egypt, married a rich woman, and he can't write because he doesn't have any thumbs. But my question is, his wife couldn't write?
Yeah. Or he couldn't type it up still.
Well, he didn't know how to type, so if it was really Artemis, he wouldn't know how to type.
But he already typed a letter, technically.
Well, this is true. I don't know. It's one of the most ridiculous things I've heard. So Ruby talks to the man for about a half an hour, and she said he spoke irrationally and wildly, but seemed to have first-hand knowledge of Artemis. She gave police the name the man identified himself as, but the name has never been made public. So we don't know what his name was, but he was irrational, wild. I mean, obviously he's irrational if he's saying he doesn't have any thumbs and he's living in Egypt with a rich lady, but he seems to know a little bit about Artemis. And he called from Memphis, Tennessee. So if Artemis had actually traveled overseas, he didn't do it under his legal name. But he didn't check into the hotels under his legal name either. No steamship company had any record that he had traveled with them, and the U.S. Embassy in Cairo was unable to find any evidence he had been there. Police were able to find a third hotel in Kansas City where Artemis Ogletree had stayed, and he had shared the room with another man, though it wasn't established if this was the mysterious man named Don. In 1937, New York police arrested a man named Joseph Martin for murder. He killed a man he had been sharing a room with, put the body in a trunk to be shipped to Memphis, Tennessee. Also, he was in New York, which wasn't two of the things that were sent to her May 1935, a letter, the 2 letters, special delivery letter and the other letter were sent from New York.
And then the phone call was from Tennessee, but the guy was also sharing a hotel room.
Mm-hmm. Among his many aliases, Joseph Martin used the name Donald Kelso.
Was he rich, though?
No, he doesn't have to be.
But someone paid for the funeral.
Well, he could...
And he's traveling to New York, so he's probably rich.
Probably has some money, or steals it. Apparently, Kansas City Police Department also matched handwriting samples from Joseph Martin to the letters received by Ruby Ogletree. The case was kept open, and every few years, detectives would review it up all the way through the 1950s before it went completely cold. In 2003 or 2004, a local historian at the Kansas City Public Library got a phone call from someone out of state who said they had been helping to inventory the belongings of an elderly person who had recently died. Among the belongings was a shoebox, which turned out to be filled with newspaper clippings related to the case, and a mysterious item that was also related to the case. The caller did not identify himself, nor did he identify the item. The historian didn't make any of this public until the conclusion of the second of 2 posts he made on the library's blog retelling the story in 2012. So he gets this phone call in 2003 or 2004, says nothing. Somebody says, oh, I have something related to the case. This guy says nothing until he decides to blog about it on the library's blog in 2012.
Did they ever find the stuff?
No. Nope, they didn't know who the person was. There was no name. The person who had called never said what it was. Police were never notified about it and didn't learn about it until 2012 in a blog post.
That doesn't sound very convincing.
It doesn't. It sounds more like a publicity type stunt to me.
Oh, I found some new evidence.
Exactly.
I don't know what it is, where it is, or who has it, but it's out there.
Exactly. We're at the theory section of our discussion. So we're going to talk about what we think happened. So a couple of theories. The first one is that he was killed in retaliation for breaking an engagement, basically cheating on the woman he was engaged to. There's a little support for that because there was a phone call about the funeral where the person says that's why he was killed.
The fingerprints.
There was a woman in the room. There's fingerprints on the phone.
The prostitute.
The prostitute is seen. I don't think he was killed because he was engaged to somebody and cheated. I don't think that's what it was.
No, because I think it was more to do with, like, if he was a boxer, or more to do, like, organized crime, like mafia or something.
Yeah, organized crime is the next theory, and some people say that because of the name Don can also be a title for a mob boss, but I'm going to say maybe not organized crime like mob. What about a pimp? So a pimp, you know what a pimp is. Okay, I'm just checking because you lead such a sheltered life. A pimp, if a prostitute has gone to the room and he has stiffed her money or there was some issue, the pimp would come to take care of the problem. So that's one of the things that I thought of was that, well, I guess organized crime, mob bosses run.
Yeah, they would have ran.
They would have run that too. So yes, it would still be organized crime. That somehow he ticked off somebody in organized crime and that's who killed him.
He could have dated like a mob boss's girlfriend or wife, or he could have done something else, maybe not made a payment. He also was very specific on what room, like he was scared or afraid of someone.
Yeah, he didn't want to be on the street. So, and the maid said that he seemed to be scared or concerned about something.
Yeah.
And also, so they found the third hotel. There were 3 hotels that he had stayed at while he was in Kansas City. It's like he was hotel jumping. Like he had a room in one place, moved to another place, and then moved to this place and didn't have luggage with him. It was almost like he was trying to hide from somebody.
Hide. He didn't have anything. I think also if you're engaged, you're probably like you're like settling down more.
So then, basically, whoever this Don person is, it's believed that that's who killed him for a personal reason, either with the help of prostitutes or on his own, which is kind of a given. I mean, that was actually listed as a theory. That's not a theory. That's just kind of stating the facts.
Or it could have been, if it was like organized crime, like he wasn't the one that was doing it, but like hitman almost.
Right. And then the other question is, I think this Joseph Martin is very possibly the Don that was talked about. One of his aliases was Donald Kelso.
Yeah.
If he's using that alias and that's how he knows him, he would call him Don. So then the question is this Joseph Martin, he's killed somebody, he's arrested for killing that person, he was sharing a room with him. Is he a serial killer? Is he killing people to try to get their belongings or something?
Well, this guy was poor, though.
Well,
if he's killing for belongings, he's not going to be getting much.
Or whatever. I mean, he had to have some money. If he's able to stay in a hotel room, he has to have some money.
Yeah, but at the same time, he's hitchhiking to California while this Don guy, he went to New York at some point. Whoever paid for the funeral, which was $500, which is, I mean, it's not a lot, but it's a lot to give for someone you wouldn't know.
Yeah.
Especially if you're poor.
Mm-hmm. So then my other thought was, what if perhaps Ogletree was gay and this was the cause of his murder? If Joseph Martin was involved and he's killed another man that he's roomed with, is it possible that Joseph Martin was having relationships with these men he was rooming with? Or if he was luring men who were gay in order to kill them? That is another theory that's thrown out there, that was a possibility.
I don't really believe that one because he was with two women at a liquor place. There was mentions of a prostitute.
Yeah,
there was female fingerprints on his phone.
Yeah.
I think there was a woman involved, but I don't think it was because he was gay. I think it was probably because he messed up somewhere with a woman.
I kind of was believing the gay thing until you just decided to pull the whole common sense crap with me. So I guess I would have to say at this point, the one that I lean more towards is it has something to do with the prostitutes, that he somehow wronged the prostitutes, either didn't have the money to pay, somehow tricked them or did something, and their pimp is who showed up to take care of what was going on.
I don't think so, because like a pimp wouldn't be able. I don't think he would be smart enough to use a ruler to disguise his words. I would think it would be someone who's in charge of a mob boss, but he wouldn't kill them. He would have hitmen kill him.
Well, I mean, Don would be, the heavyweight.
Yeah,
he would be the person to do the dirty work.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean, he may not be the head honcho, but he was probably in charge of protecting or looking out for these prostitutes, making sure they got paid.
I think it was more something to do with mob boss, because
I do too.
He was running. I think you would be more scared of like a mafia boss than someone who's in charge of prostitutes, in my opinion, because someone that's in charge of prostitutes probably doesn't have like a giant area that he's in charge of, while a mafia boss, he's probably in charge of like an area, but he also probably has people in other areas. Right. And he's scared. He's not moving. He's not even, because he stopped sending letters, didn't he, at some point?
Yeah, they hadn't seen him, but they had gotten some letters from him, but I don't think they had gotten any recently. Also, why would a pimp boss mail his mother several times and then some guy call her? Like, that's too much playing for a pimp guy. That would be more of someone that knew him. Which then goes back to this Joseph Martin, who, if he roomed with him at some point, would have firsthand knowledge of, because they probably shared things. If you room with somebody, you're going to share things with them. You're not going to be silent and not speak to them. And they did match the handwriting to two of the letters to this Joseph Martin. Well, Joseph Martin could have been helping. He could be in the mafia. This is true. I don't think the Joseph Martin guy was working alone, and I don't think he was a pimp boss. I think this had all to do with mafia. Basically, we're not ever going to really know. Well, it was 90 years ago. 90 years ago? 80. 86. Okay. 87. I trust your math, because I'm not doing it. 87. So, almost 90 years ago. Yeah. We're never going to know. Because this was in 84, right? I mean, 34. 34. So that would be 87. 35. So it'd be 88. Yep. I think. Anyway, a long time ago, and we're probably never going to have answers to anything that happened unless somebody stumbles upon something written down somewhere, because whoever did it is dead at this point. Yeah. Unless if, this case is closed. They're never going to solve it. No. They're never going to, unless they find some sort of written deathbed confession or something. Unless the guy that wrote the blog earlier finds out who has the stuff, where it's at, and what it is. Yeah, if that's a real story.
Of course it is.
Yeah. Well, anyway, that's going to do it for this episode of Lurk. As always, you can find us wherever you listen to your favorite podcast and at lurkpodcast.com. And on the website, you'll find all the episodes and links to our social media on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. We also have a Facebook group, and we'd love for you to join in the discussion there. We have merchandise available at lurkpodcastmerch.com. And if you have any suggestions for topics, or if you just want to say hi, please send us an email at lurkpodcast@yahoo.com or message us through one of the social media apps. And I just want to give a quick shout out to David in the UK, who recently sent an email offering some topic ideas from across the pond. So thanks for that. And as always, until next time,
keep lurking.